started soon. I want to start with the Vancouver Canucks because just yesterday they made a trade that their fans immediately after they saw the news had one reaction, and then that quickly turned into another reaction, and then 3 hours later there was a whole other reaction. Canucks Twitter went crazy over the Vasily Podkolzin trade. Vasily, my apologies. Traded to, of all places, the Edmonton Oilers for a fourth round pick in 2025. Now, the reason why the reaction was so vulgar and just out there after this trade was completed, immediately after, is on its face, this trade doesn't make any sense for Vancouver, just looking at it from a casual point of view, because fans around here where I live have been excited about this guy since he was drafted 10th overall in 2019. Coming out, he looked a bit like the Chris Kreider archetype. What I mean by that is power forward play style with a scorer's touch. And I would argue Podkolzin's scoring touch coming out of Russia was probably a little bit more talented than Chris Kreider's coming out of, I think he went to college NCAA hockey. Regardless, Pods was a point per game in the World Juniors. He was more than a point per game in the Russian Development League. And in the time he played for the Vancouver Canucks in the minors and in the major leagues, he flashed a bunch. There were plenty of times where he would have a quick burst of speed or a play through the neutral zone where he would keep possession, where you'd be like, okay, that's why he was a top 10 pick in the draft. It's, but that's all they were. They were little flashes, they were spurts. And I find out, yesterday that he's been traded for a bag of pucks. And it's just like, well, this guy had something to him. Why are we trading him away for, listen, fourth round picks? There have been some really good ones in NHL history, but I think it's something like 96% of the time within the first 2 years, a fourth round pick will be out of the league. So it's not like they're exactly getting premium value for this prospect who clearly has high end talent. So at first, me and all my friends who are Canucks fans were super upset. But as I thought about this trade more and more, and I started thinking of logical reasons behind this trade from the Canucks front office perspective, because everyone is really quick to call the GMs stupid or over their heads, which authentically sometimes they are, but most of the time these are professional hockey general managers. These guys have been working their whole life in hockey operations. There is most of the time pretty sound and logical reasoning behind their decisions. Now, I don't always agree with it, but most of the time there is a train of thought that would lead you to make the decision that is easy enough to follow. So the reason why I think this trade took place is twofold. One reason explains why they traded Podkolzin in general. And the second reason explains why I think they traded him to, of all places, Edmonton, the team that sent them home last year and has been probably the biggest thorn in their sides, really ever since McDavid and Draisaitl started hitting their prime. So the reason he got traded, and this is going to sound like a cop out answer, but it's just what I believe, is he simply hasn't developed the way anyone in that organization thought he would. Now, he spent his whole career going up and down between Abbotsford, the Canucks' AHL team, and the main roster. And I hate to say it, but it's for really good reason. His best season with the Canucks was his first season with them. He had something along the lines of 40 points in 79 games, maybe 30. I should have gotten that stat. I apologize. But the reason for that was, A, the Canucks were terrible. So you can take more chances sacrificing defense for offense when you're trying to catch up and down 2 goals. And Talkett was not there with his systems. Sorry, 26 points in 79 games was Podkolzin in his first year with the Canucks. So for those two reasons, Pods was able to play a lot more free, a lot more offensive minded. Whereas since then, he's been pretty invisible out on the ice, if I'm being authentic. It's 2022, 23, he had 39 games in the NHL. He scored 7 points in 23-24. He played 19 games and had 2 points. And even in the AHL, he's barely above a half point per game. So you get this guy who's not only supposed to enforce the play, but his other main job is scoring, and he hasn't done that. So, in my opinion, this is kind of the Canucks folding their hand. They probably don't think his trade value is going to improve significantly, if at all. So, you give him a new location, a fresh start, you get a draft pick out of it, and hopefully it doesn't come back to bite you, because that's why I want to explain the second reason. Because why would you trade him to Edmonton of all places? Like, you don't want to trade a guy with any kind of potential in your division, because you play that team 7 times a year, and you're going to see him all the time, and he's going to come back to haunt you. But the reason I think is, and I have no sourcing on this, this is not coming from anyone I know who knows agents or GMs, none of my contacts. This is me, period. I think he has some character issues. And the reason I say that is, again, why would you send a player with potential to your division rivals if it isn't to somewhat try to sabotage that culture? I don't know if it's a poor work ethic, poor attitude is probably more likely, but something like that could absolutely have an impact on the culture over there. Now, this could be totally wrong. He might come in humble, but it's like sending a mole trying to invade a country, except the mole doesn't really know he's a mole. He's just kind of there to mess things up and, just ruffle feathers a bit. Now, is Podkolzin that kind of guy? Again, I don't have sourcing. I don't know. He hasn't been in the league enough to really do a lot of media, and he doesn't really speak great English, so it's hard for me to get a read, and I don't know him personally. But Patrick Allvin, he's had some pretty good luck with these trades lately. He's a smart guy. I don't really love his draft history, but when it comes to making deals, he's usually on the upper hand. And I could be totally wrong. I could be. The Edmonton, maybe they were the only team who would be willing to give up a fourth for him. Or maybe they really went after him because they believe in him. I don't know. But I feel like they would take less from another team to not risk Pods potentially haunting them in their own division. Now, I know that they did it with Kuzmenko a couple months ago, but they didn't have a choice because they were trading to get Lindholm, who was on the Calgary Flames. There was no getting around that, really. And listen, I think Alvin's earned the benefit of the doubt. I think there's a lot more behind the scenes to this deal than meets the eye. And to be honest with you, I think this is kind of a nothing deal. I think you get a fourth, and you're trading away a guy who clearly has some high top end potential, but his floor, I don't even know if it's a floor. It's more of an abyss. Like, he's bad defensively, just straight up. I didn't mention this earlier because I wanted to be nice to the guy, but he's not a good defensive player. He has a lot of just mental errors where he doesn't cover the D quite as well as he could and isn't on the boards when trying to get a break. Just little stuff. So I think this is a little move that could have big impacts later on for the Oilers if they end up making a playoff run, maybe a bit of depth scoring. But other than that, I feel good about the trade from the